Welcome into PressBox Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles of PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. And with me on this Monday foray into the world of baseball are Luke Jackson, the managing editor of PressBox, and the old left-hander himself, 0.2 to 0.6%er on the Immaculate Grid, Ross Grimsley.
Is that good? Is that okay?
That's great. It means you're old, Ross.
It's a lot more than Stan and I have, I can tell you that.
Yeah, we've got 0, 0, 0. The two of us. Hey guys, let me just ask a question to start out with, and that is, what company has the expertise and technology to make your home substantially more energy efficient, comfortable, and even virus-free? Well, that would be AJ Michaels Heating and Air Conditioning in Baltimore and Annapolis at ajmichaels.com. And you'll notice that my name is Stan Charles on the screen, Stan Charles 23. If you type that promo code in when you sign up to use Superbook Sports, they'll give you a $250 match, up to $250 for your first bet on Superbook Sports. That means you could bet the Seattle Seahawks tonight for $250. And if you lost $250, you know what's going to be in your account? $250. So they are one of the most trusted names in the book business out in Vegas. They're now here in Maryland, in addition to 7 or 8 other states. I urge you to use Stan Charles 23, that promo, or Glenn Clark 23. Take advantage of that $250 first bet, win or lose, matching bet. All right.
How'd you do,
Luke Jackson, Luke Jackson, Ross Grimsley with us. We've got, as they say on all the TV channels now, we've got breaking news. Luke Jackson, why don't you tell our viewers what they've missed in the last 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, today the Orioles and the state have agreed to a new 30-year lease. And if you read the announcements from the club and from the state, they don't get into the exact details of the lease. I think we'll read a lot more about that in the coming days and months about what plans both parties have for Camden Yards. But yeah, that's pretty much the big news of the day.
Yeah, that is big news, and the news started to spread around that they really had an agreement, but this had to be voted on by the legislature today to approve it, and now it's a done deal. Like the Baltimore Ravens, the Baltimore Orioles will have a $600 million essentially fund that they can go into and use to spend on capital improvements to the ballpark. But those things must be also presented to the legislature, I think it is, or the stadium authority, and gain some type of state approval before the money is granted. So we are probably, whereas the Ravens signed their portion of the lease 6, 7 months ago, they now have presented to the sports fans in the area, they have presented plans, cold hard plans of what they intend to do with the first 250 million and that 600 million. And I think that 600 million is accessible over about a 8 or 10 year period, I think.
Right. It's not all at once.
No. And then there's room to gain more money for extending again on the lease. So this is an ongoing thing. Shows great deal of foresight by the state of Maryland and the stadium authority. The Orioles, though, chose that time between the agreement by the state to give the clubs that money and signing it. The Orioles have chosen that time to spend about 4.5, 5 months just arguing that they wanted more than they had agreed to initially. And they haven't won that agreement yet. They've won some preliminary approvals that they now can submit to the state, right, Luke?
Right.
Presentations.
Right. All the developmental rights stuff has been punted for a few years.
Yeah.
And I think what this lease for the Orioles does do is that it at least begins the process of how they're going to upgrade the stadium itself.
Yeah.
at least starts that process. And I think all Orioles fans who have been to games in recent years understand that it is a 30-year or
It's a
I should say a
30-year-old building.
31-year-old ballpark that needs some improvements and needs some renovations. So
Now,
It,
Luke,
it
still a
definitely
great
does
ballpark,
need some
but-
improvements. It does need some. What is it lacking? I mean,
well,
is
it needs a new sound system for sure.
definitely number one
And
is the sound system.
you know, the scoreboards are outdated. I think it's fair to say. And I know that, you know, maybe the Orioles want to do something with left field upper deck, turn that into something other than what it is
Okay,
right
yeah.
now.
Than traditional seating, some
Right.
type
And
of
so
more
there
sky
are some,
boxes or something like
you know,
that.
it's still a great ballpark. It's still a wonderful place to see a game.
Yeah.
There are some things that probably need to be handled though. And you know, this money will make it more possible to do that, I guess.
Yeah,
Luke,
I was under the understanding it was stuff around the ballpark. I didn't know it was the ballpark itself.
No, the 600 million is for the ballpark itself.
Okay.
What John has been arguing for is some sort of developmental rights to create stuff around the stadium, and he made a really unrealistic grab. I thought all along it was to fix up this from Utah Street into the ballpark, from like the Hippodrome, make a corridor that was Oriole Way or something like that.
Right.
But John was really much more interested in grabbing half of the parking away from the stadium authority and owning that property to develop it for other businesses, restaurants, bars, clothing stores, and the like, and some type of music venue.
Right.
I'm sure will be a part of this.
And I think that the warehouse itself was also a part of that fight because I think it's like half full right now, right?
Well, what happened, Luke, was the parking lots were a non-starter.
Okay.
Because they then would have to have come up to the Ravens and said, well, we took half of your parking, so we got to come up with something for you.
Right.
And they would have said, well, we'll build parking lot on top of the stadium or something crazy. So that was a non-starter. Then Governor Moore and his anxiousness and naivete, I think, and how to do a deal. And I like Governor Moore, but suddenly John was going to have the rights to the building for like 99 years or something like that. That seemed like an overpay, great overpay. Anyway, the news is, so here's the question, Luke. I'll ask you because you've read the press release. Of the 600 million, the worst part of the ballpark might be who they send out the pitch as a number one or number two. Can they use some of that money to replace?
We've been talking about elite quarterbacks of late. That was an elite segue.
Yeah.
All right. That was phenomenal. That would be great, Stan. A Dylan Cease trade would be awesome. What do you think? That's the guy I've had my eye on.
It's not so much the trade; it's using the 600 million.
Okay, that's what we're going
to pay one of these players.
Okay,
get them.
Okay. I would defer to you. Is that possible?
No.
Okay. All right.
They're not using that money.
All right.
And I guess what I'd like to pivot to today is seriously. I know it seems early in the winter because the winter is just starting in 2 days. December 21st will be the winter solstice.
Right.
But we're 6 weeks away from them showing up to Sarasota. And are the three of us satisfied with what they have done so far? And does that mean that they won't do something from here till February 15th or March 1st?
Right. Well, I'll go first. I think the answer to that is no. We're not satisfied with what they've done to this point. But to be fair, I think fans of about 25 teams are not satisfied with what they've done. The Cubs have not spent any money in free agency at all. I don't think the Red Sox have spent any money in free agency at all.
Kansas City, I think Kansas City is probably the second largest team.
It might be second or third because I think Arizona might be second now with the Gurriel signing, if I'm not mistaken. But I think Kansas City was second for a few days there. So, and I think Kansas City's had a good offseason. But I think everyone is looking for that starter for the top half of the rotation, top of the rotation, or whatever you want to call it. They need somebody who fits into a playoff rotation. And I guess the market right now is frozen, waiting for the Yamamoto decision. There are a lot of big market teams who want Yamamoto, and I'm assuming that the teams who have like a Dylan Cease or a Shane Bieber uh, are probably waiting to
until their
see.
pitchers become much more
Yes,
desirable and
yes.
valuable. Yeah.
And I think the agents for a Blake Snell, for a Jordan Montgomery, are probably waiting as well to see who loses out on the Yamamoto sweepstakes. So I think the market's a little bit frozen right now. It's very slow moving. But yeah, I think it's also fair to say that Orioles fans want to see more from the team before players start trickling into Sarasota in early February.
Ross, I know we've kicked it around in different ways, shapes, or form. Are you, if you go into spring training with Grayson, Kyle, Dean, John Means, and Cole Irvin, are you satisfied that that's going to be enough for the Orioles to win the division again, or at least compete
You
at the
know,
highest?
you have Wells, who very possibly could start.
Tyler Wells, I'm sorry, I left
Yeah,
him out. So
yeah.
that's
I mean,
six guys.
yeah. And so, I mean, they won 101 games last year with, and granted, Gibson was one of the guys that put up some good numbers for them.
And don't forget they won't have Jack Flaherty this year.
No, exactly right. You know, and I still, Cole Irwin. Here's a guy that I really think could be beneficial because he did it, a few years ago. He put up some good numbers. He averaged over 6 innings a game. So I think there's something there with him, very, very possible. But I mean, they won with the guys they had. Obviously, they lost Gibson. So I don't know if they're in a big hurry to make spend a lot of money, but they have some people that they can move and get a quality top of the rotation starter. So I think that's what everybody's waiting for and hoping for, actually, because you get one of those guys that comes in. You hope that, but I think they're going to wait and try to hang on to what they got and get the right deal. They get the right deal to get a top-notch guy. If not, they may get one of these third, fourth tier guys, starters, and go from what they've done in the past and try that.
Luke, is it fair to say that since they can't compete at the highest ends of the free agent market, and frankly, I am like so shocked that Jack Flaherty got a $14 million, even though it's a 1 year deal.
Right.
I thought he was going to be looking at like five or 6 million with some incentives that might have bumped them to 8 or 9 for 1 year. I can't believe the Tigers gave him flat out 14 million, I think, plus some incentives based on the season he had.
And perhaps we're not the best people to ask about Jack Flaherty because we've seen him at his worst.
Yeah.
But it sure seems like that contract was given out like as almost like a hope and a prayer that he could rediscover his near Cy Young self. But that was all the way back in 2019, Stan.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago at this point. And, sometimes you could see glimpses of that kind of stuff, but it was only over the course of 2 or 3 innings. And he couldn't hold his stuff 2 times through an order, 3 times through an order. And sometimes the velocity would fluctuate where, you saw the good velocity his first start in Toronto where he was up to 96 and he had good stuff. And you could see why the Orioles sought him out via trade. And other times he would be like 90 to 92 and be getting hit around. So, but on a 1 year, $14 million deal, you're paying him to be like something between like a 4 and 3 starter. And like, could he do that?
You're paying him for what we paid Kyle Gibson last year.
Could he do
and
that?
The price a year ago was 10 million.
Maybe he can do that, but I would prefer to give that money to someone a little more predictable, a little more reliable, like a Kyle Gibson.
Yeah.
I prefer to give Kyle Gibson 14 than I would Flaherty. So, it was a little bit surprising in terms of how big the number was, but that's the market. That's the price for pitching.
But is it
supply and demand?
Is it, Luke, is it then fair to say, though, that they've got something? Look, we're not going to, with this is not Pat Gillick or Roland Heeman
Mhm.
where stuff is leaking out and
Right.
the media gets things. Mike Elias keeps a very, very tight
Mhm.
ship,
Yep.
tight lips. Uh, but is it fair to assume that Mike is working hard on either a Cease trade or at the same time simultaneous looking to complete one big trade, say a Cease trade or something with the Marlins? Is it fair to
Yeah.
say that that's what his focus is on now?
I think you're absolutely right. And I think Ross hit on it where they're probably preparing for two different tracks to try to set up some possible trades while also eyeing some possible fallback options on 1 year deals. Because I'm going to assume that via the free agent market that they're going to stick with 1 year deals because they haven't done anything other than that
Yeah.
under Mike. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And there are some possibilities for 1 year deals out there, whether you want to say like a Lucas Giolito bounce back, a Martin Perez. I
I
mean,
think
these,
the number one guy to me now, free agent wise, that's in their ballpark is Michael Lorenzen. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
he's not that far off from what Gibson was going into last year. I mean, pitched a no hitter for the
yeah,
Phillies.
yeah. And all of these guys that we're talking about, especially at this, part of the market are all flawed. Uh, I think the thing with Lorenzen that is a little worrying is that he just hasn't thrown that many innings in a single season before. Last year was his innings high by far, and he wore down toward the end.
Yeah.
And after his no hitter in Philadelphia, it was not good. And he fell out of the rotation not long after his no hitter. So I think that Lorenzen is somebody who could help you certainly the first 3 or 4 months of the season. But to me, if someone like that would be your big addition to the rotation, you're punting on that big trade acquisition until the
Yep.
trade deadline.
Yep.
And so and I don't know if they would be willing to make that big move at the trade deadline either. I don't know.
Given that Flaherty got 14,
Mhm.
what do you think Lorenzen gets, Ross?
Good question. I was shocked as well that Flaherty gets that, but I mean they're probably going off of what he's done in the past, and you're talking about him being in the upper 90s at times. I mean he was all out trying to throw that, and with no regard to location or whatever. He's a guy now that's he may make a mechanical comeback and with a year under his belt now from all his injuries, but he's been hurt, so it's hard to say. Just like the market is, some of these guys are getting 10, 12, 14 million bucks, so it very possibly could be. But there's a few guys out there, and like if the trades, if they're not happy, I think Cease is the guy who's another. And what's to say they may not go for another bullpen arm? I mean,
Well, actually, Stan brought up an interesting concept to me. I think it might have been just texting me with the Marlins, where I think, Stan, you had a starter and a reliever coming to Baltimore, right?
Yeah, I had what I thought. Here's a team that doesn't have a lot of resources. Their owner's not putting a lot of money into things. They lose Soler, but in this trade, they would get the equivalent to Soler and Santander, who they're going to have to pay $12.5 million to. We give them Joey Ortiz, who's a shortstop prospect, to play short for them. That allows Jazz Chisholm to stay in center field, and we throw in Ramon Urias, who's I don't think is going to be on this ball club come March. But those are three potential everyday players. We get back either Luzardo or Braxton Garrett, and we get Tanner Scott back. I think that's a fairly decent trade. I think that's a fair trade.
I think that makes sense for the Orioles. I do think that they would have to sweeten the pot a little bit. For me, because
Does
sometimes
Cole Irvin sweeten the pot at all for
no,
you?
I was thinking more along the line of prospect capital. I'm not sure what that would look like.
you're going to have to give up something. You're going
Yeah,
to
I
have to
just
give up something, and
that feels a little bit too good to be true to me.
yeah.
So
In terms
somebody like a Cowser
Yes.
Like
I think now
Santander?
you're talking. Yeah,
Okay.
I think now you're
Okay.
talking.
All right.
So yeah. But yeah, I think that would certainly help the Orioles, and Luzardo would be a very good fit at Camden Yards, and he has the kind of stuff that would fit in the AL East, because that's one of the first things that you're wondering about when you acquire a new pitcher for this division is the stuff good enough to miss bats in
Right.
some of these ballparks like Yankee Stadium against these and I think with Luzardo the answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, ironically enough, he has some of the same issues that Dylan Cease has in
Right.
terms of running some high walk rates and deep counts and not getting deep enough into games, but the stuff plays. That's
Ross,
for sure.
have you seen him enough? Luzardo, Jesus
No,
Luzardo.
no,
You've been a little removed from things. Yeah.
yeah.
Originally a Washington National prospect, correct, Luke?
Right. And didn't he go to
He
Oakland?
went, I think, in the Doolittle Matson trade.
That makes
I
sense.
think it was one of those trades. They made a couple trades, the Nationals, and he was with Oakland, and then Oakland traded him to they traded him to the Marlins for Starling Marte.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good trade. And then the A's were unable to keep him. So, let me talk a little bit about the Costas Inn. Then we'll figure things out and dash to the finish line. We're talking baseball with Ross Grimsley and Luke Jackson. I'm Stan the Fan Charles, and what we're talking about now is a lot of stuff that's hypothetical. There's guesswork. There's uncertainty. There's gambling. And that's not what you get when you go to the Costas Inn. There's no surer bet if you're choosing a place to take your family for a nice meal. And let's be honest, you pay nice dollars now when you go to a good restaurant. And the Costas Inn, even in the days when restaurants were a lot more affordable, they've always given value to their customers. Costas Inn has been at the same location for over 50 years at 4100 North Point Boulevard. Winter's upon us, but that doesn't mean it's still not crab season. Call them up at 410-477-1975 and make a plan. Find out what the availability is, what sizes, and the cost, because you got to be prepared for all three things. Make your plan to eat at the Costas Inn with family and friends for crabs, or every night of the week, Monday through Friday, they got great specials at the Costas Inn. Too numerous to mention now. Also, some of the best crab cakes around and fantastic crab soup. The place to go for the holidays, but also all year long, the Costas Inn. We are
We're on our
back.
way up there, Stan. We'll be up there Friday. We'll be there
You're gonna
Friday.
are you in you're still in Florida, right?
Still in Florida, but we're coming up Thursday.
And you're going to the Costas Friday
We'll be there before we go back.
before you
Come
go
back
back.
down
All
here.
right.
Oh yeah,
Is it the crabs again or
of course.
yeah. All right.
Absolutely.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Guys, let's just pull away from the backdrop for just a second. And I'll pose it to Luke first, and then Ross, I want your thoughts on it. Who has had a good offseason so far? We know the Dodgers have done pretty well, picking up Shohei Ohtani and Tyler Glass now and Manuel Margot. Luke, who else has done anything that you think you'd be a little excited about? Arizona, they've made a
Yeah, I
couple
think the
moves.
two obvious ones are the teams that we mentioned about 10 minutes ago, Arizona and Kansas City.
Yeah.
I think both. Let's start with Kansas City. Last year was terribly disappointing for them. However, on a positive side, especially in the second half of the season, Bobby Witt developed into one of the best players in baseball, period.
Yeah.
And I think that you have to start to put at least a decent, competent team around him if you want any hope of keeping him long term.
Yeah.
And I think that this offseason is an important step to show him that they're committed to doing that. Now, and the question now is whether that can translate over to the field. But they have an interesting rotation now. I don't know if Jordan Lyles fits into that rotation anymore, of whether he's just a long man in the bullpen now. But they picked up some good arms. Seth Lugo is a good starting pitcher. Michael Wacha is a good starting pitcher. Those guys will give them chances to win. And like I said, it's all about, for me, putting a product together that Bobby Witt wants to be a part of long term. On the other side, Arizona obviously has the magical run in the postseason. I think Eduardo Rodriguez is a nice fit for that rotation. They got the two right-handers at the top of
I
their
had also,
rotation.
not to interrupt you, Luke, I read an article the other day. He said his relationship with Mike Hazen, the team president, and Torey Lavulo there, because they were both with Boston when he was there,
Right.
that there was a relationship that made him feel very, very comfortable.
And so, and I wouldn't call Eduardo a huge stuff guy, but he's a great command guy. And he's never going to have those blow up starts where he's like walking the ballpark or whatever. He tends to be a guy that gets you deep into the game. And I like the fit in that rotation, and hopefully Brandon Pfaadt continues to develop, and maybe Pfaadt is more of like a number 4 starter rather than the number 3 starter he was in the playoffs for the Diamondbacks. And hopefully if the Diamondbacks get to the playoffs again, they don't have to do any more bullpen games like this past year. That didn't work out so well in the World Series. That wasn't great. No. So yeah, and then they brought back Gurriel, who was a really nice bat for them last year. He can hit. He's always been able to hit.
Professional hitter.
Yeah, professional hitter. I think he signed for $342, which is a fair price for him. And so I like what they've done. And so I would say those two teams really stick out to me. And honestly, it's almost like half the league hasn't done much of anything. No. So it's slim pickings in terms of that.
Ross, you have a thought on that?
Yeah, no, I think Arizona getting the guys they have managed to get it. That's a big thing for them. Getting as far in the as they got with the people they had, and now they've improved that. Kansas City, like you said, they've made some moves with Waka and some of the other guys, so their pitching has improved. And like you said, you got to win some games. Or just like the Angels, the guys are going to start leaving because they want to go somewhere and win, and that means more than just about anything. Winning is fantastic. You love
Ross. We've sort of blasted Flaherty a little bit with how his career is right now. He was a one-time, looked like he was going to be a great starting pitcher.
Yes, sir.
But having said that, the Tigers lost Erod, but they're getting back Casey Mize, they're getting back, I think, Matt Manning. They've got a deep starting rotation now with Skubal and Mize and Manning, and I'm leaving somebody out, but they've added Kenta Maeda and Jack Flaherty.
Right.
Looks like they're going to be 7 deep. I think they're preparing themselves in that division to make a little bit of a run, because Minnesota is losing Sonny Gray, Kenta Maeda, and they're trying to trade for Escobar and Kepler right now to cut salary back. So I think the Tigers are poised to make a nice little run in that division.
I think stuff after the first of the year, you're going to see things start to happen. Get a better idea of who's really going all out to make a run, for the coming season. But it's a little slow now. But just like Luke said, I think Kansas City, I think Arizona's made some big steps to improve themselves. So it'll be interesting to see what happens after the first of the year, when I think things will start picking up. We'll see some trades, we'll see some signings, and you'll get a pretty good idea of who's doing what.
Yeah, I like when teams have an agenda at the start of the offseason and don't nickel and dime it too much. They just go out and do it. And I think with Kansas City and Arizona, they had a plan and they just went out and did it. So I like that.
Yeah. Kansas City especially, they have such a quantum leap to go from where they were but they're in the right division.
Right.
There's a division you can improve 15 or 20 games and at least be competitive. They might have done enough to do that, because, as you say, Witt's turning into right before our very eyes, making me wonder once again whether we picked the right guy, the Orioles. Love Rutschman, but Rutschman's not going to be the hitter this guy is.
And the thing with Witt is that you really have to show progress over these next 2 years, or else you got to start to think about trading him. And you don't want to do that, man.
No,
you want to build around this guy for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. All right. Last question for the day. The Yamamoto deal will probably take place in the next 7 to 10 days,
Mhm.
from what I gather. It really looks like this is a heads-up battle between the two New York teams right now.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
Who wins in that case, Luke?
Ooh. Typically, I have learned that when the Yankees or Dodgers want a player,
They get them.
they get them. So if it's between the Yankees and Mets, I'm going to assume that it's going to be the Yankees who gets them. But I mean,
That's if Yamamoto wants tradition and
right.
wants to wear the pinstripes. If he wants the most money, he's going to get it from the Mets.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, I mean, or the Dodgers. I mean, they're not paying Ohtani anything, so they got plenty of money for Yamamoto if he wants to play with Ohtani. So, I mean, I imagine being Yamamoto right now. You got every big market team willing to spend about $300 million for your services.
You think Ohtani's
Pretty good time to be Yamamoto, I would say.
You think Ohtani's talking to him?
Oh, I bet.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he is.
Apparently, Ohtani talked to Glasnow before that deal was consummated.
Yeah.
Hey, got a quick question. I heard Jim Bowden the other day on the front office on XM Sirius Radio. He wasn't blasting Perry Manasian because basically he was saying, and I'll cut to the chase. He was basically saying, and he didn't use Peter Angelos at all, but I am. If you thought Angelos mishandled the Manny Machado, Zach Britton, you ain't seen nothing yet compared to how Manasian handled Shohei Ohtani. They knew they weren't going to get him. They even weren't willing to go when he gave them one last chance to match the Dodgers. And now we don't want to do deferrals and all that. And they not only went all in to try and get to the playoffs last year, they then doubled back the other way and said, well, we can't make the playoffs. That's between like July 31st and September 1st. They jumbled everything that they had acquired. They gave up prospects to get rid of those guys.
But as we have seen here, when there's no coherent plan in place, sometimes the results are not great. So
I don't know whether fans have loved Artie Moreno there or not. He certainly has gone out of his way at times to spend the money, but I can't think of a Major League Baseball team that mishandled a piece of valuable property like Shohei. And I'm not even saying to say, hey, we got to sign this guy or else. But boy, if you were not going to sign him, how could you not know that a year and a half in advance and have gotten? Bowden says you could have gotten 6 prospects for him.
Yeah.
That
was just that was not knowing what to do at the time you're supposed to do it.
And I guess one of the reasons they held on to him was that every start that Shohei made in Anaheim,
they were making money.
Yeah, and then he got hurt.
Yeah,
and so he didn't make any more starts. So the whole thing was a mess.
Very sad. Very sad. And having said all that, I still think they can be better without him. I always find when teams say, we can't let this guy go, and then he goes, it's surprising 2 or 3 years they're better than they were back when they had a guy. So we'll see what happens. Hey, want to thank AJ Michaels Heating and Air Conditioning in Baltimore and Annapolis at ajmichaels.com. Also want to thank our sponsor, Superbook Sports. Again, they have the Superbook first bet bonus, $250 matching to your first bet, win or lose. They'll match your first bet up at $250 if you use promo code StanCharles23 or Glenn Clark 23. Don't miss out on making some money on Superbook Sports. And of course, the Sure Bet that cost us in, we thank them. Guys, I think we'll take next week off. Christmas is on Monday. Let's just take the week off and we'll reconvene after the first of the year. Sound good?
Yeah.
Perfect. Might be some action going on by the time we get on again.
Maybe something will happen.
Yeah, really.
Hey, how long are you going to be up for, Ross?
We're going to go back before the first of the year.
Okay. Will you be
So-
here as long as the 28th?
Possible.
All right, we got
Let's
that
get
thing,
together.
that thing we did last year with Matt Dryer out at
Okay,
Nick's,
yeah.
out at Nick's. I think it's on December 28th.
Right. Okay.
If you're going to be in town. All
Right.
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 All right.
All right, buddy.
For Luke Jackson, Ross Grimsley, I'm Stan the Fan Charles. We hope everybody out in our viewing audience has a very great holiday season, Christmas, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate. We hope it's peaceful and a warm time with your family. That's it for now. I'll be back later in the week with our sports business huddle on Wednesday evening at 6 o'clock. But for now, that's it. Bye.